Ever get to the end of a workday and feel just completely wiped out, even if you didn't do anything that physically taxing? Well, it turns out the problem probably isn't you, it's the system. For a long time now, we've been trying to run our brains on an operating system they were just never, ever designed for. Let's get into it.
And that's the big question, isn't it? Why does it feel so draining? We're all expected to be on pretty much all the time, just cranking out work at a steady, constant pace. But what if that's the very thing that's burning us out? What if our brains simply don't work that way?
To really understand the problem, we have to go back like over a century back. We've basically inherited this model for work that treats our brains like machines on a factory floor. And folks, that model is starting to crack.
This image really just nails it. The whole idea of the assembly line was built for predictable, repetitive physical tasks. But then we just copy-pasted that whole philosophy onto knowledge work. I mean, think about it. Our open-plan offices are kind of like modern-day factory floors, where we're supposed to just keep a constant, steady output. The problem is, that's not how great ideas happen. Creativity, deep thinking, real problem-solving, that stuff doesn't follow a 9-to-5 schedule.
Okay, so if the assembly line is the wrong model, then what's the right one? Well, the answer is actually hardwired right into our biology. Our brains have their own preferred way of working, and spoiler alert, it's a lot more dynamic. And here, you can really see the difference. On the left, you've got that flat, monotonous line of the industrial model, just constant work. But on the right, that's your brain's natural rhythm. It follows something called a power law, which basically means short, intense sprints of high-focus work. And then, this is the important part, followed by periods of recovery. And this isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. It's an incredibly efficient and sustainable design.
And get this pattern is everywhere you look. Researchers studied the letters of people like Darwin, Freud, and Einstein, and guess what? They didn't reply at a steady pace. Nope, they worked in bursts. You see the same thing in the foraging patterns of hunter-gatherers. Even the brain activity of newborn mammals follows this exact same power law. So the point is, this isn't some new productivity fad. It's a fundamental biological blueprint for how we operate best.
Okay, so if this burst and recover cycle is our natural state, then what's actually pulling the levers inside our head? What's driving these big shifts between intense focus and just zoning out? Well, the answer lies deep down in our brainstem. There's this incredible network that acts almost like a manual transmission for your mind, letting you shift between totally different mental states.
And here is the actual hardware running the whole show. Deep inside your brainstem, there's this tiny little cluster of cells called the locus coeruleus, which is a mouthful, so let's just call it the blue dot. This little dot is like your brain's internal pacemaker. It fires off these little bullets of a chemical called norepinephrine, and that completely reconfigures your brain's activity, letting you shift from one mental state to another. It's literally like changing gears in a car.
So you see, the secret to what some people call hyper-efficiency isn't about forcing yourself to stay in one high-performance gear all day. Not at all. It's about becoming a master at shifting between all three of them. So let's break them down. All right, first up, we have gear 1. This is your slow power state. You know that feeling when you're just waking up or maybe sitting on a park bench and your mind is just kind of wandering? That's gear 1, and it is absolutely essential. It's how your brain rests, recharges, and maybe most importantly, it's the state that makes you receptive to those brilliant aha moments that seem to pop up out of nowhere. Then we shift up to gear 2. Now, this is the optimal zone for deep work. This is that flow state you hear so much about, where you're completely absorbed in what you're doing. In this gear, your prefrontal cortex is totally engaged, giving you what feels like a superpower of focused attention. The camera analogy here is perfect. Your main target is in super sharp focus, and everything else just kind of blurs into the background. This is the sweet spot for peak efficiency. But wait, there's more. Gear 2 isn't just one size fits all. It actually has 2 different flavors. There's a low-energy version right on the edge of Gear 1, where your focus is a little looser, which is perfect for stumbling on creative, spontaneous insights. And then there's a high-energy version, closer to Gear 3, where your brain is really primed for complex learning and connecting new ideas. And finally, there's Gear 3. This is your emergency sprint. It's that jolt of energy you get when there's a crisis or a crazy tight deadline. It's very high power, but it's also very high cost. When you're in this state, your ability to think with nuance kind of goes offline. Sure, you can type faster, but you're also way more likely to misunderstand things and jump to the wrong conclusions. And here's the real danger. Spending too much time here literally causes wear and tear damage on your brain.
So this is maybe the most crucial point of all. Shifting gears isn't just for efficiency, it's protective. That high-stress Gear 3 state actually causes cellular damage over time. But by rhythmically shifting back down into Gear 2, and especially Gear 1, you actively rescue your brain cells from that damage. Mastering these shifts is the key, not just for peak performance, but for long-term brain health.
Okay, so we've got this incredible system inside of us. But here's the thing. It is not one size fits all. How easily you shift between these gears? Well, that depends on your own unique built-in tendencies. And this is where it gets really personal.
So here's the key question you need to ask yourself. Are your gears stiff or are they springy? You see, some of us have springy gears that just shoot up at the slightest push, while others have stiff gears that really need a good shove to get going. Figuring out your personal profile here is the final key to designing a life where you can actually thrive.
Let's break that down. Someone with a stiff gear personality, they need a bigger push to get into that focused Gear 2 state. These are often the people who thrive under pressure. They love deadlines, they get energized by big challenges. Now, on the other end of the spectrum is the springy personality. These folks leap up at the slightest nudge. A simple text message can feel like a fire alarm, and they often overshoot right into that high-cost Gear 3. They tend to do their absolute best work in quiet, low-stimulation spaces. Now, if you're wondering which one you might be, here's a really simple experiment you can try. Sometime in the late morning or afternoon, just find a quiet, dark room and lie down for 20 minutes. If you find yourself drifting off to sleep really quickly, your gears might be on the stiffer side. But if you're wide awake when that timer goes off, not even drowsy, you're probably more on the springy side. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? What does it all mean in practice? It means we need a totally new way of thinking about work, a whole new metaphor for how our minds operate. That old assembly line model forced our brains into the rigid, step-by-step pace of a marching soldier. It's a model of unnatural constraint. But our brains were designed for rhythm, for flow, for grace. By understanding and mastering your internal gear network, you can stop marching to that old industrial clock and start moving to your brain's own rhythm, more like a dancer. And that is how you become not just efficient, but truly hyper-efficient. And I think we can end on this thought from Marshall McLuhan. For 100 years, we've tried to force ourselves to operate at this unnatural machine-like speed. But maybe the biggest breakthrough is realizing that our greatest strengths don't come from forcing a pace. They come from embracing the powerful, protective, and brilliant rhythm we were all born with. So the only question left is, are you ready to stop marching and start dancing?